And so that's when I started another company called Pinpoint, and that went from 2004 to 2019. And then Konfidently came right after that.
Being productive or finding some new way to channel.
Yeah, he did Netflix and chicken, not Netflix and chill.
Yes.
That was good.
That's a good one. That's the
line. It's going on social media.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We're Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, your hosts, and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 U.S. senators, 14 governors, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering the question, what if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a unique and engaged audience we call Liberty Spenders? Now, Liberty Spenders are politically conservative or faith-based consumers. They make up roughly 40% of the country, and they're looking to buy from businesses that align with their values. And today, I won't steal Kurt's thunder. As you guys know, he introduced the guests, but we have a really special and really awesome person that we're excited to introduce you to. And so I can't help myself. I'm too excited today. Kurt, take it away.
Felix Lin, who has over 20 years of business operations experience running executive search and executive coaching, leadership training organizations. He's developed the Konfident Fit methodology, which we're going to talk about today, for elite teamwork. He teaches it to train leaders to be their best, to establish focused and passionate cultures that are aligned. As the CEO of Konfidently, Felix provides executive and key person search for growing organizations, including some amazing companies that you may have heard of, like Google, and people like Tony Robbins.
Who's that? Yeah.
Draper University, Goldman Sachs, Y Combinator, Idea Lab, and global youth leadership programs, tech conferences, sales teams, and maybe we'll get into it, even the empowerment of gang leaders. Felix's mission is to show leaders how easy it is to create elite teamwork and get elite results in any organization. So we're excited, Felix, to have you on.
Chase, it's so awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on the podcast.
Yes, welcome, welcome.
Well, Felix, Kristen and I, we know you because we met at a Tony Robbins event and from the Tony Robbins community. And we know because of your senior trainer role there, you've got to work with Tony almost more closely than anyone else, who mostly see him in an audience of 10,000 people. So we're going to take a point of personal privilege. I want to hear your coolest Tony Robbins story.
No pressure.
Okay, I think the coolest Tony Robbins story that most people can understand is, like, I got to go with him in 2018 to go work with the Golden State Warriors. They were having a kind of a mid-season meltdown. Steph Curry was injured, and Steve Kerr, the coach, asked him to come and speak to the guys. They had no idea who he was, but within about a couple hours later, they were all jumping up and down. They were all going crazy. And what he did with them, and it's obviously something that's too long for this podcast, but what we did with them was absolutely magical and something that I actually use in what I do now. And watching them go through the rest of that season and seeing how aligned they had become, and that they were calling each other out to be their best in on the court, then they won the championship. And that was the last year that Kevin Durant was part of that team. Or actually, no, he was there for one more year. But it was an awesome experience to have.
That's really cool. Did you get Steph Curry's autograph? That's
no, I'm not. I know that you don't break the fourth wall.
Yeah,
you definitely don't break the fourth wall.
Or maybe some good tickets, out of it.
He says that, though we get that. It's just like when people ask, do we have pictures with all the politicians we've worked with? And do you have all kinds of stuff? And I'm thinking, no, I don't ever ask. You don't tend to ask for that when you're providing that level of service. And so you ought to know better, Kurt. But
yeah, I know. I think Tony somehow, I think he's part owner of the club too. And
he is now.
I've often wondered, does he get sort of royal treatment when he goes into the stadium and escort him down and Mr. Robbins, Mr. Robbins. I just think that would be really cool. That's on my list of dreams, right? To be a sports team owner and be able to walk in, like a total big deal.
Yeah.
He walks right into the locker room now. He's got that. At least from what I've seen, obviously I don't know, but what I've seen is that he has access to everywhere. But the one really cool thing is I got to meet Sean Livingston, and Sean is he at that point he's more of a role player, bench player, and he was a superstar for the Celtics at one point. But if you remember, he blew his knee out in an unbelievable way. I mean, it was like shocking. Like people didn't want to watch that video, but he made his comeback, right? And that's what I love is that he dug deep, had to come back. It probably took him at least a year to at least get back to the place where he could start building strength again. And he did it. He came back and played professional basketball for many years after that. So I actually got to shake his hand. That was actually the person I wanted to meet when I went to go see that team.
That's cool. Well, and of course, you've seen so many transformations that occur through Tony's teaching and trainings, and to be a part of that for so long, it's got to be so fulfilling because you get to see examples like what you just said over and over and over again, and the power of what people can achieve if they have the right mindset and the big enough why. And so, yeah, that has to be just a cool thing to experience. So I'm glad you got to have that.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was worth all the 27 years I've worked with him. That one moment was everything. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I would have thought it was meeting Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt on Zoom to talk about human resources, but I'll take Steph Curry. But I know Tony's had a big impact on our lives, which is why we've been to so many of his events through the years. What would you say has been your biggest lesson learned listening to him speak or being in his presence all these years?
For me, it was the understanding that no matter how many different cultures there are, I mean, we've been in rooms with in person with about 6,000 people, right? Or even more in the UPWs. To see that many people be able to get along and actually care about each other at the end of a seminar is in breaking down all the walls of everything that we thought we had to be or thought we were supposed to be, and just come out the other side of it is really amazing every time. It's just incredible to see every time.
Yeah. Well, in one event I don't get to go to because I'm a little too old at 45 is the Global Youth Leadership Summit, which I know you help lead every year. And I think from our conversations, one of your favorite things to do. Tell us a little bit about that and what makes it so awesome to participate in.
So we just actually finished it up. So we just finished it last week, and my kids went through it this time. Both of them went through as well. So that is, if we had all of these tools, imagine if you knew what you know now at 14 to 16 years old, right? What possibly, how could life be very different? And we get the opportunity to do that every year. And it's a dynamite opportunity with about 350 young leaders from 30 different countries from around the world. And so not only do they get to learn from some of the best leadership speakers around, they also get to take it back with them. And next thing you know, there's I remember one time after one of the events, there's a 17-year-old that is in Kenya with their friends that she just met, and they're all building a school together for some disadvantaged kids there. And I'm and when I was 17, I was playing video games in my dad's basement. I'm like, what are these guys doing? And just the other year, we had a young man who got after we do a contribution day on day 4, and he got so inspired by it, he went and raised $2 million for conservation in the Amazon. He spoke in front of the UN and raised another, I think, 10 to 20 million after that. I mean, what these young leaders can do these days is out of this world. And we just want to be a little bit of that spark so that they realize that they're powerful and that they can. And they can do much more than me. That's for sure. They're amazing.
Yeah. Well, seeing that transformation, I'm sure, is what makes it so awesome. And so you get to be on stage one day, and then the next day you go home behind enemy lines there in California and raised chickens. Not on a farm, but like in the middle of Los Angeles. And I've been there. I've met the chickens. But how did that whole thing start with the chickens?
For people listening, this is great. We're getting into Felix's backstory, and what makes him so such a unique person.
So in 2020, after COVID started, we were like, okay, so we got some time on our hands right now. It's like, okay, what if something that we wanted to do? And we thought, okay, well, we've always wanted fresh eggs. We love fresh eggs. And so why not have some chickens? And so we started out with 4. And the next thing you know, my wife discovered that she had this lost like skill. She should have been a carpenter. Or like she started building everything. Her whole goal now is how many power tools she can actually collect before we all pass away, right? How many power tools can we pass on to our kids? She builds these coops that are unbelievably awesome. Like I should be living in them. You guys have seen them.
Yes.
And so now we probably have about 25. It's nuts.
Wow.
Oh, that's more than I thought.
Yeah, we give our eggs. We have so many eggs. We give them to our neighbors. And when eggs were like $12 a dozen at one point for us, it was like it's really nice being able to give those away to people. But fresh eggs are amazing.
Yeah, and if Gavin Newsom's listening, we're talking about the Felix Lin who lives in San Diego, chickens inside city lines. That's look somewhere else. Yeah, it's amazing how we discover sometimes these things that we're interested in late in life, right? These passions, and it's often kind of the weirdest stuff you don't expect,
Yeah, well, or it's spurred on by something that you wouldn't have wished for or wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah.
And again, what I love about that is you said you had time on your hands, but you know what a lot of people did? They just binged Netflix and
right.
And other people choose to do. I get it, but hats off to your wife for being productive or finding some new way to channel.
Yeah, he did Netflix and chicken, not Netflix and chill.
Yes.
That was good.
That's a good one.
That's the line. It's going on social media. So, but before you got passionate about chickens, I know you've been passionate about business ownership and entrepreneur. Yeah. How did that journey start for you? What brought that sort of passion for creating into your life?
So I started with a recruiting firm, a national recruiting firm back in 1996. And that firm called Source Services and I had one of the most brilliant leaders, actually a number of brilliant leaders there that helped grow me to top 10% on the sales side within 2 years. And what ended the chain of events that happened in our lives, right, that are really fascinating to look at later. In 98, that our company was bought by a company called Romac. And when we went to go meet with them, it was a very large merger between these two organizations. We just weren't excited about their leadership, right? It just wasn't my style, right? And this is actually a big thing to talk about later, but it wasn't my style. So my boss and we started our own company first in 1998. So our first recruiting firm started back then. And so we did key person search, we did some executive search, a lot of tech search, and we went through the tech boom. And we thought nothing could touch us, right? We were just crushing it. And then the tech bust happened, and boy, that was a real eye for us. We got through it, and we still did okay. But then
you weren't the only ones, I'm sure, shocked by that.
Yeah, that one hurt. But the biggest thing that hurt, it burned out my partner, and he actually quit the industry at that point, and he just needed to get away. And so that's when I started another company called Pinpoint, and that went from 2004 to 2019, and then Konfidently came right after that.
And I knew it grew for 12 years pretty wildly, right? It's successful. Most businesses, last maybe a year, right? Many not even that, and over a decade is a really big deal, and shows a lot of foresight and ability. Tell a little bit more about that story of your own business, your Pinpoint.
Yeah, so we grew until about 2008 when the recession happened, right? And we took a hit, but we actually came through that actually really well. So through a couple of things that helped us out. One of them was going to Tony's Business Mastery, and then just learning some of the things there that helped us go. And then by the time about 2015, we probably peaked right around $9 million. And then one of the things that Tony warned us about happened. We had one big client, and it was an awesome client, and they were incredible, an incredible client. And then a billionaire, I'm not going to name names, but a billionaire decided to get on their investor call and say that they were a scam and had shorted the company right before he did that. And so their stock tanked. And we had a number, like probably about 30 to 40 consultants running there at the time. And by the end of that year, they had laid all of them off. They were all gone, right? First, like temporary workers are the first ones to get hit. And so, fortunately, that company's doing just fine. Another billionaire came and had a battle, and it was a very interesting thing. But we were caught with our pants down because we didn't have a great sales part of our organization. We've been trying to build it for so many years, and it exposed our weakness in a big way, right? And and so the next 3 years, I decided to make every wrong decision I possibly could. I do not want anybody listening to this to go through that kind of pain. It was horrendous, and ultimately ended up in having to bankrupt the company when I could have if I had just shut it down in 2015, I probably could have walked away with $2 million of equity that was already still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Keith Cunningham, who I know we both love and respect.
Yeah.
I love one thing he says, right? Most of us would benefit not from some missed opportunity as much as we would benefit from being able to roll back one decision that we've made. And if we would have just done that one thing differently. And I know you talked about client concentration, but if you could roll back one decision in that time period that you think would have made the biggest difference, what do you think it had been?
I wish I would have known what just with like the kids, right? I wish I would have known then what I know now. The beauty of this is that after starting Konfidently, after that whole disaster, we actually went back and looked at, okay, well, why are we really good at what we do? And the insights from the pain now show us, okay, this is why I'm hiring the wrong people. I made a lot of mistakes. I made mistakes in people that were completely misaligned with me. I made mistakes in not recognizing this gap that we had, thinking that I had too much hubris, right? I had too much pride, too much ego going that, I can do anything I pretty much want. And with this company rolling, and I got nothing to worry about. Everything's just going to roll, right? And I wasn't paying attention, right? And so now, it was bad. It was really ugly.
Well, and we were actually talking about this offline before we started, the challenge of aligning a company culture.
Yeah.
And, we were talking a little bit about Elon Musk and the challenge of, say, buying a company like he did, a big company like Twitter, and trying to change the culture. I mean, he's even changed the name, and how difficult it is to ensure that kind of alignment. And it sounds like you had some similar challenges there, but at Konfidently, that's your specialty. So how do you tackle that for a company?
So it's interesting. So Elon is such a divisive personality, right? There are so many people that are just jumping on social media to essentially say he's a horrific leader and he's terrible. And we're all of us as humans, we have our positives and we have our challenges, right? So what I find after using how we look at people now, I know what kind of leader he is, right? It's actually very straightforward. If you want to work for Elon, you want to follow that vision, right? And if you look at SpaceX, you look at Tesla, you look at even the Boring Company, or even what he's given away for Hyperloop, things like that. There's a big part of him that just wants to give to humanity. he wants us to get to Mars so that we don't end up being stuck on Earth if Earth, has a catastrophe, right? And he has given away his IP to other companies and other people so that things can happen. Now, is he human like the rest of us? Does he have some very interesting, parts of him? Yeah, there's definitely things that are interesting. What you'll find, although, at people who are at X now, they love his leadership style. There are people that love his style. You can find them at SpaceX. Elon is the kind of like visionary leader and pace-setting leader that the great part about him is that he is willing to do it first. So if he's going to ask anybody on his team to work 80 hours a week, he's already working 100, right? He's sleeping in his office. So you know what you're going to get if you go work for him. You have to be so like loving of what his mission is for that specific organization. Like, that you don't, if you want to go to Mars, you don't go to, to like what was, to Amazon's company or to Virgin Galactic, right? You don't go to any of those companies. You go to SpaceX because of the vision. So, I think X for him is free speech. And so the people that work there now, that's what they all, that's the mission that they're on. And so that, people who will want to work for him, they love that style. It doesn't mean that's right for everybody, but it's right for them. And that's the whole point of figuring out who's the person is that you're looking to hire. Are they right for you?
Well, and of course, that's what Konfidently is focused on. And that's what you've been so passionate about, aligning people, make sure you're hiring the right people. And so I can't wait to let people understand more about this and your methodology. And you've created that yourself called K-Fit. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the Konfident Fit is because I've been with Tony for so long, and I've actually in 27 years on the executive recruiting side, I've done 10,000 plus interviews myself, not just my team, but me personally. And also in our companies, we've placed thousands of people. So there's a lot of track record there to figure out why we're really good at making those placements. And of course, if those placements don't work out, we don't get paid, right? So it's part of the process of making sure that you have a way of doing it. And because I have been in the human psychology and human development side for so long, I naturally started doing things in those interviews that we do with other people that are different than most recruiting companies, I would think. And in fact, we do an interview. The interview process now that we do is completely different. And that process is taking, we have 16 questions in this interview process. And we record the whole session so that any CEO or business owner can actually watch the session even before they decide whether they want to interview the person. As far as I know, there's no other recruiting company out there that actually sends you a video of people, like their own interview. Most of the time, the recruiting company wants to do as short an interview as possible and then have you screen it, right? So I don't believe that's good at all. I believe that we need to find out where are people at their best? That is the fundamental question behind the Konfident Fit. In what environment do we succeed the best? And that environment changes over our career. And then the next question is, okay, so now that I'm watching this person, can this person be completely successful here in my organization? And I can actually see it when they're answering these questions. I'm getting data points from each question that we're asking because there's no right or wrong answer. They just pick they have their experiences. They are picking what they love. And it's awesome to watch it happen because now it's like, wow, this is a joyful interview. And the side benefit is if they now know that you are the organization that has what they want, they will make you the number one choice. And it has nothing to do with salary. It has nothing to do with anything else because they know they're going to grow the most with you.
Well, I know to your point, we've worked with a number of hiring firms, sourcing firms, recruiting firms in our time. And yes, to your point, I don't know of anybody, I've not heard of anybody that does that records it, that offers that so that you can get that glimpse to see. And having known you and worked with you, again, full disclosure, it is remarkably different. The approach you take and the care you take to understand, again, what is the leadership style of really the overall company? Because it all starts with the leaders. And then how is that trickled down? And making sure that environment is right. People talk about culture alignment and they think about core values and a couple of those things. But your approach is so unique because it's not one thing. I mean, you just explained it very well, but you take several attributes and put all of that together to find out if this person's going to fit just from a work style and preference. I mean, forget everything else and the skills and all of that. And I love how you clarified even that shifts over someone's career, because that is absolutely true. I can speak for myself and think about how what my work style was, what my tolerance for, putting in all those hours, to your point of pace setting, and how that shifted when I became a mother and, different seasons of life. And those things really are true. A certain company can be right, or a certain type of role can be right for you for a time, and things may shift and it may not be the right fit anymore. And the care that you take and your company takes, I think, is just remarkable to make sure people are getting in a place where they're going to thrive and they're going to love where they work. And it's great for the employers, right? Too, because now you have someone that you feel like fits with what your expectations are. And there's so many nuances there to unpack, but it is unique.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been an honor to work with you guys, for sure. You guys are incredible leaders.
Well, and I'll tell you, we're seeing in the market right now, and particularly for a lot of the people we work with, Christian business owners, conservative business owners, where they're really getting employee alignment is so essential. We've seen employees at Google try to protest their company's defense contracts by doing sit-ins at work. I think we've seen some employees at companies like Bud Light or Tractor Supply Company that have led the company away from the core values of their own customers. And that really starts in the interview process. And it's not something, A, that some employers recognize, B, that they can figure out. Because sometimes it's hard to find those things in an interview. Everybody's on their best behavior. Everybody loves the company in the interview when they're looking for a job. So what kind of questions, what kind of probing do you feel like you're doing that's most effective to help identify that cultural alignment?
So what you're describing is the first date, right? The first date, what I call the first date syndrome when it comes to interviews. And hopefully this isn't too crass, but in the first date, nobody wants to fart, right? So you may need to edit that out, but that's the truth, right? So there's a big study out there that shows that 81% of people lie in interviews. And it's not all malicious lying.
81% of people
81% of people
in interviews?
Lie in interviews, yes.
Okay.
And so you can look up that stat on Google or Perplexity or whatever you like to. You'll find the study. And it's a big one. And it's true, right? Because you guys have interviewed all kinds of people. People exaggerate. And it's not, again, it's not necessarily malicious. So they say, oh, I can do that. Maybe they can't do it at all. But say, oh, yeah, I can do that. But that's a challenge with the interview questions that are being asked, right? And how traditional interviewing hasn't really changed in the over 27 years that, that I've been doing this. There's some new tools that help, people use personality tests, but that doesn't give you clarity on what they believe and who they are, right? So our biggest goal is so the question we approach this with is, how do you stop people from lying? You make it in their best interest to tell the truth. And the best way to do that is to ask them what they love. And then you can see it on their face when they talk about what they love, right? And the cool part about building this thing over the last couple of years is that people really enjoy the interview process. And we're asking them questions that are not binary. They have multiple choices. And it's all based on different tools and viewpoints and things that I've learned and things that I've created over the course of time. And the great part is that they choose what they love. The hiring manager gets to watch it and go, okay, I see what they love. Oh, that's us, right? And if the hiring managers know, like the business owners know who they are after doing their own version of this, then they can recognize right away if somebody's really aligned with them, because there's 16 data points. It's not just like values is definitely one of them, for sure. We want to talk about what people value. There are other things that they talk about that uncover, what they want. And the thing is, we don't want people working in a in an environment where they're not going to fit, because it's a brutal experience for everybody, right? The employee has a really hard time. They just are just trying to get by. They don't feel like it's the right place for them. The employers are not getting great output from people. So we want to avoid that. And that's what's happening because of the problem with the current interview process. It's really poor.
Well, and I'd love to get an example of that. So to really make it tangible for people, because
Sure.
I want people to understand the uniqueness of it. So can you give us an example of something like that where you've interviewed someone and you discovered a misalignment that may not have been obvious in a typical interview process, but came out because of the way you approach it?
Yeah. So one of them is that there was a friend of mine wanted me to do the interview process with a salesperson that he was really excited about, right? And he's like, I really want to hire her. I would like you to interview her. Just do your thing, and let's talk about it afterwards, right? So I talked to her, and I understand exactly why he wants to hire her. She is dynamite, right? She is just asking great questions. She is just a joy to talk to. It's like, if this person calls you on the phone, I'm going to talk to her because she's just joyful to talk to, right? So it's like, this is incredible. And then we got into what we utilize 6 leadership styles, right? And so one of her things that she loves the most is a pace-setting leader, right? And we just talked about that with Elon. For her, the definition of a pace-setting leader is a boss she has that she's shoulder to shoulder with. Every day they're fighting, right? Every day they're going to war, they're going to battle. And at the end of the day, they're high-fiving each other. At the end of the day, or they're picking each other up, and just tomorrow we're just going to go even more, right? And she goes, that's why I love, this is what I love the most about environments. And then I went back to him and I said, hey, who's going to be managing her? Now, first off, I said, she's dynamite. I would hire her in a second, right? But who's going to hire her? And he's like, well, I am. I go, well, you're the CEO and I know you. How often are you in the office? And he said, well, I'm in the office 2 days a week. And I go, okay, well, this is what she wants most in an environment. Is this what you can give her? Right? And he's like, wow. And so to his credit, he went and told her, this is not the right time. Right. And I said, he goes, I can't give you that environment yet. When I can, I'm going to come back and hire you. But you have one shot. Right. And if he brings this person who's absolutely wonderful and could knock the cover off the ball, and he goes through with it, how many people have we hired like that and that are gone in 6 months? And that would have most likely been the case.
Yep. And it's not about the person's skill set. It's not about their aptitude or the ability. It's just a misalignment that you knew was going to create problems. What a great example. That's amazing.
I think that actually comes through. Well, one is like understanding, are they aligned with where we're going? Do they know that Google was going to do that beforehand? And the second thing is because this is actually a good place for where my dad worked for Lincoln Labs for MIT's think tank. He worked for the Naval Research Laboratory. He worked at in TRW in the Aerospace Corporation. So he was around military stuff for a long time, doing research on optical computing and fiber optics, things like that. My dad was actually really brilliant. I didn't take him. I took him for granted when I was young. I just didn't know. Right? It's incredible.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. We don't even realize, how I love my dad, and I didn't even realize how incredibly brilliant he was at that time. And unfortunately, he passed when I was 19. So I didn't get to develop that any further. So I have a different. Now I also have worked with USC's University of Southern California's ISI division, which also works with a lot of DARPA.
So I want to go back to something, Felix, because we talked about the example of the sit-in at Google, and you've talked so much about values alignment in terms of leadership styles. But what would you say to companies that now have a new concern about a values misalignment for a whole other reason, for ideology or for something else that the company has a mission or they're worried about getting canceled by their own employees? And we've seen that. You can't necessarily anticipate that, or at least that's what people think. So what's your answer to that? How can companies make sure that they are really getting people that are aligned in an interview process?
So I think in the 16 questions through the Konfident Fit process, you'll actually see how well somebody can align with you. And then, so I think that question is twofold. One is the interview process. The second is the leadership style, right? And if you have leaders that are able to uncover these concerns before they blow up like that, and like, for instance, I think one of these areas is like a democratic leadership style. They want to be heard, right? They want to be talked to. They wanted to know like what's going on. And if that's not happening at their, like, they're not teaching their leaders in Google to be able to do that and kind of, I guess, nip it in the bud, perhaps, and really like have a conversation with people so that it doesn't get to this place. That's one thing. In the actual interview process, to find people that are like, that have that flexibility, right? This is something that is not part of like their, like things that we ask about, what do they stand for? What do they not stand for, right? What are things that they, and we want to find, it's not just the value alignment, it's what values do they not? And if somebody doesn't want to do government defense work, that's not like, I don't want to do anything with war, then you'll know it right away. Right? It's right there in front of you. These are the things that I don't want to take a part in. And we've asked that question. We've got that answer before. And so if your company is going to do stuff with defense, then this is not a good place for them to work. Is it just not in alignment? It's not because I want to discriminate against them. It's just not in alignment with what this company is.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the last few years in the world of HR has been a pretty wild ride too. We had COVID in 2020. And so it was, let's get out of the office and go and work remote. And then in 2021, it was the Great Resignation. And then 2022, everybody was quiet quitting. And, even now I read some statistics about employees that are still feeling unhappy at their jobs. And that seems to be such an important thing for success at a company. How are you telling companies to tackle that?
Yeah. So in 2021 and 2022, the Great Resignation was 100 million people quitting their jobs in those 2 years. Unbelievable. It's like, it's almost over double what normal resignations are. In fact, there's only 164 million people working in the US. So 60% of jobs turned over in those 2 years. And the standard, reasons for people leaving are toxic leadership, toxic culture, lack of growth, compensation, and also flexibility, right? You said a lot of people wanted to pull people back in the office and they didn't want to do that. So there was enough pain, just from a psychological standpoint, there was enough pain to get people to change, right? And so they were upset enough about their current position, they wanted to find something different. The challenge is that they did a study. So Paychex, the payroll company, did a study on people who changed jobs in 2022. They found out that 80% of people were unhappy with that change and wanted to go back to their old company, which is astounding. So so us as business owners, if we hired somebody in 2022, there was an 80% chance that person hated the job and they wanted to go back because of the way that we interview, right? It's just the interview process is broken beyond belief. We are sending the biggest thing that we need. In fact, if any business owner or any hiring manager is listening to this, have you ever been trained in how to interview?
Right. Exactly.
And hundreds of hiring managers I've worked with, none of them have. And it's one of the most important jobs.
It's outdated. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Felix, but to your point, if you have, you're probably trained incorrectly or there's a better way.
Right. And so most people shifted to more behavioral interviewing questions. More people shifted to using tools like DISC or Myers-Briggs or PI, things like that. Those don't give you the whole picture. If you do any of those things, you're going to get better results. There's no question. The challenge though is that, again, 81% of people lie in interviews. How do you know you're getting the truth? Right. So there's a big part of it where, we really want people to understand that there's a better way to do this. And I think I've come across it because of the two different worlds that collided for me. And we're having so much joy in doing these interview processes for people and with people, because now we want to eliminate that 80%. There should be no suffering. The quiet quitting is coming from people who, 68% of those people try to get their old jobs back. That's how bad it is. 27% actually did. And so they went back to a job they didn't like, right? So that's a horrible experience too. And that's where the quiet quitting came from. People are just doing the bare minimum to get by so that, they don't lose their job until they can say do 2 years of work and then go find another job, right? Or something like that. And that's not good for anybody, both the employer, the employee. Nobody wins in that situation, all because we can't figure out how to make the right match.
So what would you tell a business owner, hiring manager who's listening to this right now? I mean, of course, one thing is they can reach out to you and hire you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what kind of tangible steps if someone, they're an alarm bell is ringing and they're thinking to themselves, wow, he is right. I don't know. What is the next step they ought to take? What are some things you could tell them to do right now, or you could say, okay, get an answer to this. What would you tell them is the next step they could take?
Oh, I would say get my book that's not out yet. But we're happy to we have a WhatsApp group where if you wanted to come and just ask questions, we're more than happy to help. Right? We believe that we actually have a GPT that I created that actually helps organizations with how to process, do all the back end of hiring. It can help you create job descriptions. It can help you create scorecards, which most people don't even use, right? So interview scorecards, knowing exactly what you want, to measure people when they're coming over to, when you're interviewing them, and then having every person that is interviewing them having the scorecard so they can actually come back together and have an actual review of the person. So that does all of that for them as well. That's free. If they have a paid version of ChatGPT, we can give them a link. So, but otherwise, just call me or message me on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm happy to talk to anybody because this is such a painful process. Hiring is the most important thing, or one of the most important things that any hiring manager can do. And it's also the worst thing that they'll ever do because it's so much pain around it. There's just absolute pain.
Yeah. And the people, it's everything. Doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. You're only as good as the people and your systems and all of that stuff. But it starts by having the right people. Great.
Well, as we close up here, I wanted we like to do a quick rapid fire section. And so what I wanted to ask, you get 90 seconds or less on these 3 questions. What legacy do you hope to leave behind from your business endeavors?
We talked about this a little bit before. I want to make my parents proud. My parents were first generation coming over from China. They ran from the communists in China. They went to Taiwan, got educated. My dad came to Berkeley to get his master's degree, then UCSD to get his PhD. Worked at Lincoln Labs and MIT's think tank. Worked at the Naval Research Lab. Worked in aerospace, doing research his whole life. And they both believe that this is the greatest country in the world. My mom still does. My dad passed away a long time ago, but it's the same thing. This country offers. I don't think there's any other country that offers what this country ever. And I've been around the world, and there still is no other place I would rather live than here. And because of the people, we have passionate people. In every corner of the States, we have passionate people. It's also what makes us Americans, right? And this country is something that the dream and opportunity for every person in this country is what my parents were all about. And so if I can make them proud of what I'm doing to kind of pass that along, because they had the courage and they left China with nothing, to be able to do that and help other people out so they don't have to be in suffering and pain either, then we have a better America. And so so that's why I really love talking to you guys, because in your mission, because it's so important to have the right people in our organizations to make that happen.
Well, and you're protecting, the American dream, which is really just the ability, if you want to, chart your own path to, again, follow your aspirations, which for a lot of people is starting a business and seeing that grow. And we want to protect that and do what we can to build and support and foster that, which is, again, like you said, unique to hear.
All right. Number 2, 90 seconds on anything, but it just can't be about HR and interviewing and hiring. Maybe a hobby, maybe something you've been geeking out about lately. What's been on your mind?
Last year, I went to a prison and worked with this guy, John Jackson. And I met a bunch of guys, but two guys stand out. They were both Marines serving in the Pacific, and both were in jail for over 15 years. And when they came back home, they fell into the wrong people, back into the wrong people. And these are people that served in combat for us, right? That's horrifying, right? That's horrifying. We shouldn't have that. So I'm going to continue working with them. The whole goal is to help them be ready when they get out, so that they can become successful, right? And so this is something that John and I have a lot of passion around, and I'm going to keep helping him in his endeavors. So that's my 90 seconds of something that's very interesting to me.
Well, and important. And to end, we'll do 90 seconds. Make your best pitch for Konfidently.
Stop suffering in your hiring. Stop suffering in leadership training, in helping your people be their best. We've got the tools. They're very innovative. They're easy to implement, and you'll get results right away. If you want to have unbelievable results from your team, if you're having challenges, we can either help you with your hiring, your interviewing, or your training. We will make we'll make a massive impact in what you do.
Well, and of course, we can vouch for you because we've had your help with training our staff, and it's made a tremendous difference. So we're so happy to have you on, Felix, and just so happy to share with what you have to offer to anyone that we can. And, Felix gets our stamp of approval. So it's amazing what you're doing.
Well, thanks, Felix, for joining. And to get in touch with Felix, hit him up at Konfidently with a K, Konfidently.com, and tune in. And we'll get a link to his WhatsApp group on our show notes for those of you who might want to jump in there as well.
Yep. So thanks for our listeners for tuning in. We invite you to join the Liberty Partnership community at libertyspenders.com. And there you can learn even more about how you can engage with this audience. And there's also some great free tools there. So I hope you'll check it out. Again, libertyspenders.com. Until next time, see ya.